Good afternoon, and blessings. I am just so pleased to be back here with you today. Well, I'm pleased to be with you every day. I tell you because I'm just so glad to be able to have this opportunity to share knowledge with you. You know what I think of knowledge? I mean true knowledge, not just any knowledge. And I feel so blessed, and I thank God every day for allowing me the opportunity. I thank him because, I tell everyone I just didn't start this podcast at this stage of the game just for nothing. I think he ordained me to bring knowledge that we lack so much of. But I do want to also thank this great guy here, this young man, Norm, for the opportunity to share this space with me here. And, of course, I want to thank my crew, my producers, Lula Salvador and Sheila Brown. I also want to thank the little ones that kind of keep the promo going for me, Elijah and I always want to say Alwa, but Lulu, who am I talking about? Halim. Yes, those are my little grands, and I forget the names, and nephew, right? And I do thank my advisor, Juanita McClure, for assisting me here. You know me, I'm Ruby Williams Sharvey, that unapologetic amateur, still looking for experts, and I'm bringing them on. I'm always trying to bring knowledge, lest we perish for lack of it. Now, that's not to say we don't have knowledge, but in our unique situation, ours have sort of not always been true knowledge. As a matter of fact, seldom has it been true knowledge. It's been knowledge that other folks, our oppressors, have established that knowledge, and we just have not challenged it enough for a lot of reasons. We have not been in control of anything. And when we did get a little control, we have been thoroughly brainwashed or brain dirtied, as my good friend Dr. Califani would advise me to say. And for those of us who were not brainwashed, never had the luxury of concentrating on the smaller things like racist flags and slave monuments and misappropriate phrases, narratives. We were busy trying to avoid the more lethal things like lynching and the Ku Klux Klan and police brutality, prison. So it's not that we weren't fighting like other oppressed people. It was just that our unique situation demanded different concentration and approaches. So while other oppressed groups were realizing their dreams, we were still going through a nightmare. And until we, the African people, conceptualize our situation from that perspective, we're never going to understand the trick bags we've been placed in. Now, see, for all those groups who have been traumatized, they were not stripped. They came out of their situation pretty much intact. All they had to do was brush themselves off, receive their reparation, grieve for their loved ones, and sort of move on. And not to minimize it, I'm trying to show you the difference between our situation and theirs, not to be compared. That's why I'm confident it's going to take our experts who have studied us in depth and know what the damage of 400 years have done to us and have knowledge of ways to overcome the many maladies and syndromes that come from that kind of inhumane treatment. We need to be studied. I suggest we establish places like citadels and places specific for the studying of Africanism. And you know how I define Africanism as the study of, number one, study of us as African people from the very beginning to now, and the effect of 400 years of genocide, and number three, to the solutions to our trauma. See, it's not enough just to know it, just to study it. We got to do just like any other maladies. We got to study now how to affect changes around us getting back to who we were. I just learned the word neurologist. It's the study of everything. I mean, there is a term for studying everything except us. We've never been studied in any major way for the 400 years of genocide. And, of course, we have studied us because there's Dr. Joy DeGraw, post-traumatic slave syndrome. Dr. Francis studied, he has the ISIS papers, Dr. Ben, and others. But I mean as a discipline for all people to study. I believe if we establish such facilities, it will give us more agency in dealing with the issue of reparation and would redefine ourselves for the benefit of our people who don't really know themselves yet. My reason for bringing these types of guests I'm bringing on, because I'm convinced that in addition, I say the three things that's going to get us over are the faith-based. We are very faith-based people because we know that there's a God somewhere and he's going to help deliver us, will deliver us. Yes. And, of course, the knowledge of our history, as I said, from the very inception of us as the first people to our coming across that middle passage, being kidnapped, coming across that middle passage and then hoisted upon those slave blocks to be sold to the highest bidder. And then that inhumane treatment that we had that no one in the face on the planet has ever had. I call genocide. There's a sister Anne, who established the word Ma'afa. But we got to come up with something that is unique to our situation. Otherwise, everybody will say they went through the same thing. Right. They'll tell you in a minute, there's slavery. Matter of fact, they'll tell you we enslaved. And when they say that, I'm saying to myself, we need desperately to change the phrasing, change the definition, because it was something other than slavery that we went through. So that's why I bring my guest on, because I'm convinced that we're going to need the psychology of what we went through. Many people will say, I've written books, and my 5 books, before I even started the podcast, speak to what I'm trying to say, in that we have not yet understood, some of us, understood that the damage that was done upon us and to us have lasting effect from generation to generation to generation. So I even say in my latest book, the 2 words that kind of get me going sometime, excuse and explanation. And we would say we are using excuse when we try to explain ourselves, but excuse should never be in our vocabulary. Well, it should be, but not as it relates to us. Excuse is when you were born out of white privilege, and explanation is when you were born out of the slave condition. So there are 2 different words, but we sort of use them interchangeably, depending on how it affects us. Now, I am so pleased today to have my co-host here, Terry Benjamin. I welcome my brother. We have a great guest here today. You know how excited I've been all week about this sister.
Yes.
I say that's what we need. We're going to need our psychologists and our mental health people to let us know that that's what we need to get through what we have been through. Yeah. So without further ado, welcome my sister. And I'm going to have Brother Terry Benjamin read your bio, and we're going to go from there.
Yes, Ruby, you look for experts, and I think you found a good one. Dr. Monique Swift. She is the owner of Swift Solutions Consultant Services, LLC, is a psychologist, a New Jersey licensed professional counselor, and a New York licensed mental health counselor. She has almost 30 years of clinical experience in the field of mental health and operates a private practice in Rahway, New Jersey, where she specializes in couples therapy and trauma. In addition to her clinic work, Dr. Swift also offers keynote talks, curriculum design, personal development workshops, and professional training. She consults with religious, community-based, and non-profit organizations, public and private schools, as well as private groups. She's involved in racial, social justice efforts and initiatives. She also serves on several boards, including the Board of Advisors to the Volunteers of America. And she also has a special interest in youth empowerment, race and social issues, and holistic health. Welcome, Dr. Monique Swift.
Thank you. Thank you for
it is a pleasure to
the intro.
It's a pleasure meeting you.
And it's a pleasure to have you here. I want to have, one of the things I didn't do, and I'm always negligent in doing things, and I was here earlier, I did not bring your bio with me, so I would love, and but the brother just read it. But I want you to elaborate on it because there was questions I wanted to ask you around it. It's just that I don't have it in my hands here. I want you to talk though first. Give us an intro of what you're
Okay.
doing.
Okay, sure. To not guess reiterate my bio, I do primarily, I have a small private practice as a psychologist. I have a small private practice, and the bulk of the work that I engage in is consulting work. And there's I guess, an assorted array of work that I do consultant wise. A lot of it is training and workshops that I prepare for other professionals and sometimes lay people as well. And then I additionally, projects come my way where often, because I specialize in the area of trauma, and most also dealing with race, I tend to get projects that come my way for organizations that want to be more trauma informed, that want to be more racially informed. And so working with various organizations in those capacities. I'm also getting more recently requests for organizations that want to do retreats for their staff because of, different hardships and things that are going on in that realm.
Right.
So there's an assortment of things that I do on a consultant basis, but I guess that somewhat summarizes it.
Okay. All right. Well, the first question I want to ask you, because I was reading your bio and I see where you are. It says a psychologist, professional counselor, licensed mental health counselor. I want you to explain each one and then how they connect.
Okay. So I'm a psychologist, counselor, mental health counselor. These are designations, if you will, that are given based upon training and licensure as well. I'm licensed as a mental health counselor, licensed as a professional counselor, degreed as a psychologist. And so these are those designations that I've been given that have been based upon my training and expertise that I've acquired and the work that I do. When I get the question about like what it is, what am I, and how I define myself professionally, those are not the terms that come up though. What comes up for me is, those are kind of the terms that society gives for what I do, right? And so I fall into that. But what I really do, what I feel like, really reflects what I do is I'm a helper, I'm a healer.
Okay.
And so that is really, but there's no designation, right? That's a licensed helper. So we fall under these titles, but in truth, I do believe, despite all of the training and so forth that I have, that by nature, I am born to do what I do. And that's to help and support others, to help them to discover themselves. And, I looked up my name one day, an interesting fact. I looked up my name one day, Monique, and it actually means advisor or counselor.
All right.
So, yeah. And so I just, again, I feel like there's that kind of organic thing about what I do.
Right. That's nothing but happenstance. Yeah. Now, I see where you say you specialize in issues that form at the intersection of trauma and race. And, I'm got interested in that. How explain that to us?
Yeah. So, I was, thing in the last decade and change, it's really out front. And when I began to really get into trauma and understanding trauma, and most particularly this idea of being trauma informed, right? That's kind of where, the field is emphasizing in the area of trauma, for people to become more trauma informed. The informed being understanding what trauma is and how trauma works, what it looks like, how it appears, the mechanisms of trauma. And when I began to understand that, I also began to recognize simultaneously that, this is a perfect lens through which to help people understand the impact of racism.
Right.
And so and we're all open and understanding the trauma, but it really just kind of gave me a platform to be able to advance the understanding of how the mechanism of race and racism, how it impacts the injury that it that it perpetuates on us as a people, and also like that hidden hand, right? Because it's not just that, you know, I don't like you because you're Black type of thing, right? The bigger hand is the structural piece, and so that's another element I try to help elevate people's awareness and understanding of the structural racism and how that harms, because that's something that many of us, even despite the fact that we are impacted by it, often we're not aware of.
Right.
That's
right.
a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Go on.
I'm sorry. Dr. Scott, Dr. Swift, I just want to throw something out at you, and I'm sure you've heard these phrases before. And I just want to know what is your response? People say therapy is for white folks. People say Black people don't need no psychiatrist. People say take your worries to God. Prayer is enough. How would you address those often asked phrases or questions?
You know, all of those phrases, those sound like conditioned responses that have evolved from us based upon our horrific experiences here in North America.
Okay, I got you.
You know, we had to learn that we can't, therapy is not for us, right? It's designed for white people. And to be, as a mental health clinician, that's not something I would necessarily disagree with. I think there's different shades or perspectives of that, but I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that perspective, because I know and understand that the scholarship, right, the information, the science that a lot of what we learn in school is based upon is centered around white people. They don't consider Black people in developing ideas and the theories. The culture reference and frame that is used is exclusively a Western European white perspective. And so when you're coming from that perspective, what is the outcome going to be? If the information and the skills or the knowledge base is rooted in white supremacy, then the output of that is going to perpetuate white supremacy. Right. And so I think to a large degree, that's what our field has done. Maybe in some ways unknowingly, in some ways very much knowingly, that we have been a perpetuator of white supremacy and racism. And we have been harmful to Black people. And out of that, we have learned, you know what, go to God, take it to God. Therapy is for white people. We can't trust the system, right? We've learned that. But that's not something we just made up out of nowhere. There's an experience that informs that perspective.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right.
That is why I am so determined. That's why my show is about a new way of understanding us, not through their narrative, but through what we need to our experts, what I call experts, and I have to explain that each time I come on, because people are saying, well, there's experts all over the place. No, I mean experts who are steeped in us, in learning who we are as African people and what happened to us, based on the knowledge that we have, that those of us who dare to study thoroughly of the inception of the African person, what we did in Africa, and how we were very, abundantly equipped for everything. And when we came over here, unlike Governor DeSantis will want us to believe, we were not. they didn't teach us skills over here. We were fully endowed. So one of the things that I emphasize on this show is when I talk about I'm an unapologetic amateur looking for experts, I mean that seriously, experts in the line of Africanism, not studying from anyone else's perspective. Because we have people who study from Harvard, from Yale, from all the whole 9 yards. But unless you studied Africanism from a point of view of the Dr. John Henry Clarks of the world, or the Dr. People who know us, what coming across the Middle Passage did to us, what the 200 years of inhuman treatment, inhumane treatment, how that affected us. And those are the kinds of things that we need tending to. So we have come through all of that and acquired all those syndromes and maladies. Obviously, we need someone who can help us understand and read through what all that have done to us.
Right.
Because obviously, we are great people now, but we're not infallible. We have been damaged. Matter of fact, supposed to be my 6th book, Damaged Goods Made in America, because we got to go to people like you, people like who have studied us in depth to say, okay, this is number one, we know our history thoroughly. Number 2, we know what happened when we came across, when they kidnapped us. Number 3, we know what happened when we came across the Middle Passage. We know what happened when we was hoisted on those slave blocks, on and on and on. That would define our unique situation, different from anyone else in the history of the world. So that's what is so important. But you're right, as long as we have been studying under the oppressor, as I would phrase it, narrative, we're going to come out thinking from that perspective. But it's going to take our people, the ones of us who may know a little bit about our situation, in particular, folks like yourself who know a lot. I call myself the amateur because I know you have studied and you need to study. But I wrote a book called Verbal Healing. It was my first book. And one of the things I point out in my first book is how we have managed to consume all those negative understanding and misunderstanding of us and what other people verbalize on us. So we will make statements like what Brother Terry just read. And some more of the statements we make. We are our worst enemy. How can you be your worst enemy? You got to have to do a whole lot of stuff, to be our worst enemy. And say black people don't stick together. There's a reason. I was listening to a brother before I left. It was on Facebook. He was talking about economics. And he meant well, and I'm sure he was not trying to condemn, but in the process he was. He was saying how black folks don't like to shop with each other, don't like to deal with each other. They don't like to do that. And I'm saying, I wrote back and said, well, my brother, why? That's not natural for anybody, really. And why would we be the only one that don't like us? Something had to have happened. We need people like yourself to come and put it together for us. As God has always given me examples to use when I can't explain myself. So I used, my last book was Why Shouldn't I Cry? Ode to the Black Man. When it was released just prior to the pandemic. As a matter of fact, I had been signed up for Mount Teman, and I was supposed to go in, and we had to shut it down. But what it told me was that's a good example. That's a good analogy to use when you're trying to explain people what you're talking about. Because when that pandemic came down, we didn't go around looking for celebrities of any stripe. We didn't go around looking for academician, really. We didn't go around looking for the President of the United States. As a matter of fact, he volunteered and came out himself at the time and suggested we consume bleach. So it shows you there that we needed experts who had studied epidemiology or whatever else to study. So that's what I'm suggesting with our point. We need people who study specifically for what ails us. What happened to us the 200 years, and come together, not separately. We have a lot of people who are doing it separately, but we need to get together, like other abnormalities, and study them specifically, and come together and to recognize that we went through something very uniquely different from anyone else in the world.
And it's interesting because we talk about different traumas, and I would suggest, Dr. Swift, the question I would like to know is that after the pandemic, did you get more patients, and what were the issues?
Yeah, so we know because of the pandemic, depression and anxiety tripled. And so, there's a saying that when white America gets a cold, black America gets pneumonia, right? And so these are often the numbers are just a piece of what happens to us. So I imagine what, the real numbers would pan out to be for Black people But absolutely, I mean, myself and my colleagues were all full during the pandemic and even coming to present time.
Yes, yes.
There's a belief that Black people we're averse to therapy. There's a stigma around therapy, and I have some perspectives about that.
Right.
But when the pandemic hit, Black people were coming into therapy in droves,
Wow.
and I liked how they were doing it because they were coming into therapy wanting to work with people who look like them.
Oh,
Yeah.
great, great.
Mhm.
That's good.
So that's why a lot of them reached out to me and the colleagues that I have, because Black people wanted to work with Black people, which studies show that's where we get the best outcomes anyway. So
Oh, yeah.
I was glad that people were conscientious
Yes.
about how they wanted to go into their process.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. And recently there was a book released by Courtney B. Vance and Dr. Robin Scott called Invisible Ache, which is about suicide. And one of the things in the book, they were talking that between the ages of 18 and 25, this was like one of the most prevalent groups. And my question to you is, how do you deal with young? You said you are about youth empowerment. How do you empower the youth?
So in this, I guess, dispensation of time in my life, I'm dealing majority with the adults.
Yeah.
Early on, I was focused so much on the youth. That's actually what brought me into the field of counseling. I wanted to be an educator, and as I was kind of going through school, still I was substitute teaching as well, and I loved working with young people, especially young Black males.
Yes.
That was my passion. I've done some mentoring in that area and so forth. But it was through substitute teaching that I recognized that I had an affinity for like kind of working with the young people one-on-one. I would, look at the young person that was somewhat despondent, or the one that was just kind of the wallflower, not really engaging, or, the one perhaps that looked disheveled, and kind of pulling them in and connecting with them and seeing what was there. And that's how I kind of discovered my inclination toward being a helper. And so, but now, so I've done a lot of work. I've worked in schools. I've worked, I community work with young people in the community. Like I said, mentoring and other programs as well. And now I'm not doing a whole lot directly with the youth, to be honest, at these last decade really of my career.
Yes.
But
what is your opinion of how we need to redefine or rethink or construct our need, advance for our people, our need to deal with the trauma of our past? Many times people say, forget it. Tell us easily. Forget, put that in the back. That's what then and this and now. But everyone else, though, is dealing with what's happening to them. As a matter of fact, just before you go on, like I say, I'm always God is always showing me things. I was sitting in front of my TV, and I was noticing the recent happening in the Middle East. And it's an unfortunate situation throughout, without getting political at all. I just want to say the humanity of it. I noticed when those hostages came back, when they initially came back about 3 or 4 weeks after they had been taken, there was folks who was meeting them, but it was never suggested that anyone, there were no celebrities, they didn't even suggest the President of the United States, they didn't suggest anyone. They specifically suggested mental health professionals to meet those people as they came back, because they understood there was something that they needed to have other than just or just anyone. They needed to have professionals. So I'm asking that because I want to hear what your opinion of how we need to address our situation, what we went through, particularly over those 200 years. Let's even talk about the additional 200 years of racism and Jim Crowism. But the first 200 years of trauma that we went through, how should we go about now trying to address that?
Good question.
Yeah. That is a really good question. I think it's important to kind of first understand the traumas, right? So with the example that you gave, those people who were released they understood what they had gone through. It was very clear, it's very specific. What's a little different about our situation is not so clear, and there are multiple inputs of trauma, right? We have our personal experiences of trauma that we have had where maybe there was some sort of racial affront that we experienced, or some limitations that we experienced because we were Black, or some microaggressions that we experienced, right? So that's happening to us. But we're also part of a collective of people that are experiencing collective traumas, collective oppression and abuses.
Right.
It manifests itself in another way because it undermines our collective strength. It undermines our collective efficacy, right? That goes beyond the individual. But then the other thing that also we don't pay attention to is the fact that not only are we experiencing things directly and also experiencing that collective level experience of trauma, but we're also carrying the experiences of our ancestors.
Yes.
We are also carrying, and science is now showing us through epigenetics. This might be something that you probably are already familiar with. It's become somewhat a common knowledge that through epigenetics, our epigenetic experiences, there's been a transfer of trauma from enslavement to present day. That also undermines our resilience, that undermines our ability to be able to, our wellness in general, right? And so all of these various inputs, and many times we're only thinking about the racial affront. Many times we're only thinking about, well, no one called me nigger, so no, I don't have any racial trauma. But we're not thinking about, and we're not aware of all these other very subtle, more invisible ways that we've been impacted because of this. So I would say the first thing is to be able to identify where the insults have happened, how the insults have happened, right? And then also, there's the debriefing, right? The processing through the experiences that you had, how you felt, the often illogical conclusions that we have, conclude as a result of going through what we've gone through. Often those conclusions are self-deprecating in many ways, right? And so there's this, I have described trauma in this way, and most particularly for Black people, that, it's like being shot with a gun, where the entry point, where the shooting, where the injury happens, where you were shot, that's one level of trauma. But then what happens for us, there's this kind of, it's as though that bullet ricocheted around your body, and it hit the heart, it hit the intestines, it hit the liver, it hit all of these other organs, right? So there's the initial wound, but then there's the secondary wound that happened because of that initial wound. And so for us, there's been a lot of psychological damage that has happened as a result of us functioning, living in a society that invalidates us at every level and every turn. Right? That's so horrible. So the psychological impact of that, the self-hatred that comes from that, is another level of trauma that has to be dealt with as well. So there's a lot of levels to this, and it's I would say very complex. But I also would want to mention that another level of the healing process has to do with collective, because not only are we injured as individuals, the connections between, we always have been a people that have been connected, right? We are a people who are community-based. That's how we function. We're a community-based, we're a social people. And so what racism and the trauma from racism has done is disconnected us from one another, right? And so that's also another level of healing that has to happen as well.
So what is your approach to, I know you do couples therapy, and I imagine you do family therapy. How do these two intersect, and how do you deal with those two parts, the couples and the family therapy?
Yeah. So with regard to race, or just in general?
Well, race in regard to us.
Yeah. So one of the things that I notice in the Black couples that I work with, the trend that I see, and I said I was going to do some writing and research about this, but I've yet to do it. But one of the trends that I would often see is that a Black couple will come in, and often the woman is kind of complaining about the man, that he's not, being the man in the relationship. He's not stepping up, and that he's complaining that she's being the boss and she's too dominant and and this is something that I saw a lot of. And I keenly view that as a consequence of, or an impact of, racism. Because in this society, the oppression that we experience, the racism that we experience, has cut our men at the knees so deeply, where that it is hard for him to be a man as he wants to be and knows that he is. It's hard for him to be that man in the relationship. Now, also on the other side, while he's struggling just to stand, the woman is getting a bit more privilege, if you will, right? She's allowed to have the job. She's allowed to make some advancements. So often she comes into a relationship with her man and she's got more access and money, right? And he's got less. That in inequality, or not even inequality, but that is a disorder of relationship. And it creates a lot of acrimony for us. And I do think it's important for us to look at we have our issues within the relationship, but I think it's also important to look at our relationships in the context, in a social context, right? In recognizing that there are social influences that are playing out within the relationship. And so that's there. So that race thing, it comes right into the relationship as well. It also comes into the relationship based upon disadvantages that our families and hardships that our families experienced, that we grew up under, that created certain ways of being and thinking that really don't work well in a relationship. And so you have all of these other kind of social issues that are coming up, and we think that there's something broken in the relationship, but really, in fact, it's, there's a social context that we have to open our eyes to, that is creating a lot of the acrimony that we experience in our relationships. And the same for families as well.
Now, you just said a whole lot there. That is so interesting. Basically, that's where I'm trying to go with what I'm trying to do at this podcast. How many of us, most of us, don't conceptualize that. We do not understand that from a perspective that something is happening with us. We'll think it's our fault that we don't think the same way you're thinking. But you understood it because you have done the study.
Right.
You know what happens when you're traumatized. I heard a word recently, weathering. My pastor preached about that one Sunday. And it was interesting because it showed you when you go in depth to deal with people, you can study what's happening with them. Right. He was making the point that the weathering is when, say, particularly Black men, any of us though, at midnight, riding at midnight, out there in the dark, and we see these lights behind us and they're flashing and stuff like that. We immediately go into some kind of trauma that other folks don't go into. Those are the kinds of things I'm trying to bring forth as a new way of us getting together under umbrellas. That's right. That might be schools or citadels or whatever you want to say, but separate from what I'm an amateur, would know. I'll get my expert. How can we do that? How can we capitalize on what you know, what other experts know, how to get us together so I can know. In my book, I have 3 voices that I talk about: the amateur, the expert, and the antagonist. I say the expert, the amateur, I'll start with the amateur myself. Someone like myself, I can defend. I'll get on a soapbox any day and defend you this, you that, you're the best, you're all that. That's as far as I can go. The experts like yourself can define, because you have studied, you go in depth to find out how we are what I just said, because you know what we created out of Africa.
That's right.
You know we were the best mathematicians, the best scientists, the best this, the best that. You can define that. Then the antagonist will defame it. They say, oh, no, you weren't. It'd be like Governor DeSantis. He'd say, they brought us over here and taught us stuff. So I'm saying understanding those things that we know a part of what have developed in this country around us, how can we then see that we need the same as any other discipline or any other element need to be studied under umbrellas that will define Africanism different than just say any other thing? Because you know that, I may know that, Brother Terry may know that. When I leave this place, there's going to be 90% of our people still pointing the finger and say, we are not doing this for each other, or we are this and we are that. They're not understanding it. So we got to get together, our experts got to get together under one umbrella and try to teach us what you and other experts know, that we won't point the finger at ourselves always. Yeah. If you get what I mean.
Yeah, well, there's a lot in what you were saying, and what keeps coming up in me is, I've heard it said that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that our unity is more powerful than a nuclear bomb. Yeah, yes. And as you're talking, the truth and the weight of those words are just kind of ringing in my spirit, because that's part of the issue. That is not just part, that is the whole issue. I couldn't necessarily squarely put it on the shoulders of the quote unquote experts. I think all of us play a part in terms of, being able to call ourselves forward out of the condition that we are currently in. It is our unity that's needed. It is necessary for us to begin to see ourselves again as brothers and sisters. It's necessary for us to see ourselves in the spirit of Ubuntu, right? I am because you are, and because you are, I am. And without you, I am not. Without me, you are not. And so I care for you like I care for myself.
But it's when not by
happenstance in ourselves, that spirit.
Right, you're absolutely.
I'm sorry, you said not by happenstance. Right, it doesn't happen from happenstance.
Right, it's like a point again to this the pandemic. When it first came through and everybody was in total confusion, I went to my doctor, who's the primary care doctor, and for questioning, he asked immediately, say, I'm not the expert. Now, he was an expert in whatever he was an expert. Yeah, he meant he knows specifically. So that's what I'm trying to say. I know we all have responsibility, but we can't exercise responsibility when we don't know. See, I may want to love you, but if I don't know what they did to me through slavery to make me not love you, yeah. I wouldn't know that. So that's why I totally believe that it's going to take our expert. When I use expert, I use it very carefully. Yeah. I don't mean just you can be an expert in auto mechanic. There's an expert in legalese. All those experts. I'm not dismissing them. Yeah. That's why I use the word Africanism. I want to create that word. I borrowed it so I can make sure I define it. When I tell people expert, I mean that discipline that would allow you to take all that I've said about us, put it together, and you guys get together. You experts get together. I'm going to tell you one other thing I just saw this week. God gives me a lot of examples. There's a center coming into New Jersey, a cancer center. Now, they have places all throughout the different hospitals, but someone saw the need to put that center together. They explained to get all those experts in that particular field to come together to study and get feedback on each other, blah, blah, blah. Ours is more serious than cancer. Ours, what we went through is so serious that we had 200 years of someone. We were not allowed the emotion of crying. When this young man, George Floyd, cried, it brought so much out of me, because I know our men were never allowed to cry when they saw their women being raped. So all that is instilled within us. So that's why
Right.
that's when I say expert. That's what I mean. I don't use it lightly. I mean those who will study specifically the areas that I mentioned from the inception of us to now and what that did to us and how we can come out from under it. And that just can't be put on anyone because I know a whole lot.
It's got to be us. Yeah.
I defend. I say I can stand on the soapbox and defend us till hell freezes over. But and I'm going to have to grab you to have to define.
That's right.
So that's what I mean by we need certain understanding about how we need things specific for our situation because ours were different. Ours was just not, just oddly
Right.
so.
No. It was.
It was
specific
very
to
specific.
Our history.
So I'm going to have to depend on you guys coming together, and they say some time of information may come from the least of us, But that was my pastor preached this past Sunday about God getting the not Job, was it Job that became the prince? He was the youngest of the one.
Yeah.
And they thought he didn't know anything, but he was the one that God chose. So sometimes he chooses people like myself
That's right.
to bring about issues that maybe someone else hadn't thought of.
Yeah. Well, I think,
Yes. And so I think, what you're speaking about.
Just a minute, Dr. Swift, something that
okay,
happened
we're
here.
back.
Okay, we're back. Okay.
Oh, okay.
All
We're
right.
back.
We went
Yeah,
offline
we're
for a
back.
minute, but we're back.
We're back.
Okay. So what you're talking about is what we're doing with the Association of Black Psychologists.
Oh, great.
With the Association of Black Psychologists, you're not looking at a group of people who are, I'm going to say blackface white psychologists, right? You're looking at people that have reformulated the idea of psychology to specifically fit or connect with us, our issues, our way of being. It's truly and organically us. And so the mission of the Association of Black Psychologists is to liberate the African mind, to empower the African character, and to enliven and illuminate the African spirit. And that doesn't just happen in a therapy room, right? You're talking about a wide range social change, and the emphasis and the focus of how we function is being able to go back and embrace who we were in our original state before we encountered this enemy, right? This enemy oppressor that keeps their foot on the back of our neck. And so that, I am really committed to, and I love the work that this organization is doing and what we're about. And I feel like it is fertile ground for what you're talking about. The other thing that came to mind when you were speaking as well is that one of the things we need to do if we really want to get out of where we are, we got to stop looking to our open enemy for our solutions.
Right.
And
Never, ever.
No.
Never.
Can't do
That, well, there's so many of us that are we're still looking to them for solutions. We're still trying to go by the playbook that that they're giving us. The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house, right?
That's right.
But we haven't gotten that yet. We're still trying to work.
It's going to take. It's going to take those minute. It's going to take those unique few I'm talking about. See, I'm weathering it down. It's going to take those unique few who know what you know that we will get together and develop something that will bring us to a point where we will know that maybe the few, like I say, there's schools in Citadel. Like I remember, I read about Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune when she came through and developed that school. She knew something. She knew we weren't getting it, and she knew we needed the education, not from them, but she knew that we needed it, and she developed that school. Yes. So that's what I'm talking about. We got to get to a point that we're going to start developing places that we can come together across the country, and it will be more recognized in terms of our uniqueness. People will begin to understand. We know that we need something different from what you've been giving us. And if a group of us, and they kind of eliminate the experts like yourself separately, See, there have been Dr. John Henry Clarkson, though, before. They kind of shun and put them out on the side. If we can get all
Right.
those great minds together that know what you know and what they know, you know,
Beautiful.
it would be something different. It would be something that we have put together ourselves. It was something that we know we need, different from what they have been giving us, because it hasn't been true.
That's right.
Now, I'm trying to look for my people now, Norm. I don't know what's happening here. I got to recognize them if they come in, call in. What are we doing here? Okay, I'm so sorry, Doctor. I try to recognize my folks when they call in, but I don't see them on the screen here.
Oh, that's all right.
Okay. But
Well, just
we'll go back to
highlighting one point that you. Yeah, no,
Okay, go.
highlighting one point that you made is definitely, it's not going to come from them. They're not going to give us
No.
what we need in order to come up from underneath them. And so, but I feel like that is a big step, right? Until you've taken that step, until you've recognized that, you know, our open enemy is, you know, who our open enemy is, right? That's part of the knowledge, right? You promote having a certain knowledge of our history, but I think it's important to have a knowledge of our history, a knowledge of ourselves, but we also need a knowledge of our enemy. Without the knowledge of our enemy, we're never going to be able to figure this out, because our enemy doesn't appear like an enemy to us, but continues to hinder our growth and development in very significant ways. And so until we figure that out, we're going to keep on moving with it.
Right, depending on you guys to figure that out. But in the meantime, let me recognize my folks here, Lord. Oh, I'm so glad you're tuning in. Lorraine, you finally got in. I remember watching you. Okay, Aaliyah Bay, oh, my beautiful sister. Rose Garbage talking my sister. I'm going to have her on for Women's Day. My Waller, my nephew, I thank you, baby, for tuning in. You know, he's a veggie, and he has a farm up there in New York. Yes, he has. And I tell you, I got to get up there. He said, we do not need white validation. That's so true. That's what I'm trying to impress upon everybody here. We're talking about Africanism. I just marked that phrase. I want to keep it and use it, that you know I'm talking about something specific. Nothing outside of what we can't do for ourselves, but I think it will give us leverage in demanding our reparation, because when they realize that we're serious about what we went through, different from anyone else on the face of the earth, they won't then try to include it with other folks. You know, like with the affirmative action. We wouldn't need affirmative action if they gave us reparation. That was not for us anyway. It was predominantly benefited by white women, so I understand. You know, so there are words that wordplay with us. And like integration, we never asked for integration. We just asked for desegregation. So they claim that we want integration just to rile up the white folks down south. You know, so their wordplay, and we got to begin to understand that. Dismiss what they are saying. Get our experts together under umbrellas that would allow them, the faith-based people, the psychologists, and the historians together, that they can come up with ideas and ways that will help and benefit the amateurs like myself.
We
you know,
that.
I'm so glad to have all of you who's tuning in, and just keep on tuning in, because we need that. You know, I tell you that this knowledge that I'm trying to impart to you, it's not, least we perish for lack of it. And if I have anything to do with it, if at all, I can do anything at all at this stage of my life, I'm going to continue to bring you the knowledge that I think you need to move forward. Now, let me just run this through you for my producer. Get on me. You can enjoy this program by listening to BKS1 Radio or seeing me in person on Facebook or YouTube. You can bless this program by sending a donation to Cash App, $ Ruby Shivers, Zelle, rubyshivers158@gmail.com. Okay, back to what Dr. Swift was saying. You're right. We're going to have to understand clearly that this is something so unique that we're going to have to set up programs or citadels or colleges or whatever places, as they did with the cancer center
That's
I was
right,
telling
right,
you
yeah.
about.
Yeah.
Bringing that into New
Specific.
Jersey, different, so they can get them under an umbrella, so they
right.
can, hash out whatever it is they need to learn about what they're learning about.
Correct.
It's just like with that virus. I told you about the doctor I went through. He said, I'm not the expert. Right away, he knew I was talking specifically about an area.
That's right.
Not just an expert for expert's sake, but an expert in Africanism. And until we understand that that's what we got to do to move ourselves forward, I believe we're just going to continue to be pointing fingers at each other and say, why this one is not doing that, and why this one is not doing that, and this one hates this one, and this one hates me worse than I hate you, all that.
Right.
Well, there's a reason.
Yeah, that's
This is from those 200 years of solid inhumane treatment. Yeah. So let me see someone else that's coming in. Aaliyah Bay, Dina Robinson, I'm so glad you watch us. Okay, just keep on it. And you know what? Someone said to me, I know you can share, but it was something else. Oh, like. See, I'm learning all that. So you like, and that will transfer me to other things, okay? All right, now I depend on y'all. Okay. And you know what, Dr. Swift, I am just so glad. I've been looking forward to having you because I've read about you. And someone, the guest I had on last week,
Yeah, Bill Davis.
Bill Davis.
You're
I
doing
think
an
he
event
said
in
you're going to be
Plainfield.
on an event with him,
Oh.
the good brother. He has
Yes.
some excellent.
I'll be collaborating with him on a project next week, actually.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So glad that I'm certainly going to be there.
What about that project? Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Well, it's a presentation that we'll be doing at Plainfield Public Library
Okay.
on Saturday. It's focusing on the Black family.
Okay. We'll be there. We'll be there.
Definitely.
Well, I hope you will.
Definitely. Okay, and so I got a few minutes left, and I always neglect to promote my own self. See, that's not what I do. I just heard that you just disseminate the information I think you need. But for those of you who know that I have my 5th book, Why Shouldn't I Cry? Ode to the Black Man. I'm always promoting my black men because they are worthy to be praised. So if you get that book, you can get it from Amazon. Of course, my first book, Verbal Healing, We Must Reject Tired, Trite, Tasteless, and Other Nonsensical Expressions That Keep Us Damaged. You know what that's about? Talking about all those things that we say about each other and to each other that sort of keep us damaged. And the other books that I have, I don't write fiction. I wrote one fiction called The Quarters. Excellent book. It should be into movies one day.
Hey,
It's
we
about
could do that.
I'm a Southern
That's
girl.
possible.
I tell you, it's sort of the Peyton place of the South.
Oh, look
but
out.
in addition, but what it does, it involves folks who we comprise of all different kinds of people in our community.
Exactly.
But we all from love and the village concept, in spite of what we have to end up doing sometimes. So this quarter is reflective of that. And of course, my first book, the second book, Victims of Confusion. Of course, that's self-explanatory.
Yeah,
We're
it is,
certainly
it
victims
is.
of confusion.
We are.
No fault of our own, nothing that we did. But when you're come over, when you're kidnapped from your homeland and brought to a strange land, and then go through all
That's
the
trauma.
stuff that
That's a
you've
trauma.
gone through.
Yeah.
There's no question that you wouldn't be traumatized,
Oh, yeah, you have
that
to
you
be. You
wouldn't
have to
be in some way have all the syndrome that the sister writes about in the book, post-traumatic slave syndrome, and all the other, until we get together under umbrellas, under one umbrella, 2, 3, or 4,
Whatever it takes.
without for what we have put together, not from anyone else, because no one else, first of all, won't know it the way we know what we've been through.
Exactly.
Won't recognize it anyway if they know it. So we got to take a hold of our situation and develop places for our people to be able to reach out and research and figure out what's happening with them. And as I said before, I'm going to use the word expert. It's going to take what I call expert in Africanism to bring that stuff together.
Amen.
Dr. Swift, I am so pleased that we had you on here today.
Pleasure.
It has been
Thank
a
you.
pleasure. And if you have something else you want to leave with us before you leave here?
Well, no, thank you. Thank you for your unapologetic stance. on our people and our struggle. I appreciate you and conversations that you bring to the forefront. And thank you, Brother Terry, as you are by her side in
Yes,
this work.
yes.
There are two, as we were talking, there are two statements that I were coming to mind that I guess I can close out with. And one is from an esteemed member from the Association of Black Psychologists, who in a statement about affirmative action wrote that we should not be seeking validation from those who oppress us.
Right.
And that is a statement that really resonates deeply for me. And I do think in many ways we're still looking, we're still trying to sit at the foot of a slave master and saying, please be nice to me. I think it's time for us to stand up and do for self what we're expecting others to do for us. But the other thing that was ringing in my head as we were talking is, I'm sure you're familiar with this quote from Neely Fuller, who said, we don't understand racism, white supremacy, how it operates, and everything we do understand will only serve to confuse us. And so that, as we were having our conversation, that was really kind of coming up in my spirit as well. And I'm hoping that those who are listening can really kind of take that to heart and understand we've got to figure this thing out. We cannot be blind to the racism that we're still experiencing it. As we're blind to it, that in and of itself is keeping us in a position of debasement. And so if we really want liberation, if we want true liberation, that's something we have to take for ourselves. We can't ask for it. Nobody can give it to us. And so with that, I say thank you once again, both of you, for the work that you're doing and for inviting me to be with you today. Thank you so very much.
You're so welcome.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. I tell you, and until we get to that point where we can get our people together, understanding that we got to get to under this umbrella of Africanism, so you can teach me along with the other ones that don't know, we just going to be looking forward to the day when we can. Matter of fact, do I have a minute? Because I'm going to with this virus that came down, I may even go back to school for epidemiology, because I know I don't know it. I know what it did to me. I know what it did to my folks, but I don't know it. So if I don't know it, I know I got to go specifically to that school. That's what I'm trying to impart with my people. There got to be something we set up as African people that our experts will go to, that will know how to come back to us, the amateur, and cure me. Give me a vaccine for it, whatever, but do it. Okay, God bless you all. Look forward to seeing you next week. I'm going to have someone from Africa on, talking about our Black history as it relates to us and Africa. So be sure to watch. Looking forward to you. God bless.
God bless. Bless you.
Hello.